seen as a good increase. So the first one is the amount of increase. That's the first rule that guides increase in rent. That should be for maximum of 50% of the current rent. That's for best practices. That's the first one. The second rule that generally guides increase in rent is the frequency of increase. So most times it's advised to increase rent every 2 or 3 years. So minimum 2 years to 3 years is what is advised. So, for example, if you're increasing your rent every year, that can be arbitrary. Increasing every year, that will be arbitrary. At the same time, if you don't increase for too long, when you now want to increase the rent, it can be seen as arbitrary. So, for example, the rent was pegged, it was 300,000, and after 5 years, now to increase from 300,500. The tenant most times would fund an arbitrary increase. But if you increase in 2 years from 300 to 400, after 2 years from 400 to possibly 500, that gradual increase will be more receptive than a jump from 300 to 500 after 5 years. So even though the time is long, there could still be some frowning against. You had an interjection?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Okay, yeah.
That
So that's
is
the
just
second. Yeah,
yeah.
the length. Then third is the notice for the increase. So the notice to increase should be given minimum 6 months to the end of the current tenancy. It's not as if the landlord wants to increase the rent and then your tenancy expires in December, and the is telling you that for your next rent is this amount. So it's always nice to have at least 6 months notice so that the tenant can have enough time to prepare for the increase in rent. It's often best to give it a year in advance. That is, this is from your next rent. After you tenant pays for the current rent, then from your next rent, I'm increasing it. That's the best. But latest 6 months to the end of the current tenancy, inform the tenant that your next rent is going to be this amount. So it's often, those are just the 3 rules that best guide increase in rent. So first is the amount of increase, maximum 50%. Second is the frequency, between 2 to 3 years is advised. And the third is the notice to be given to the tenant, mostly minimum 6 months to the end of the tenancy. Best is a year to the end of tenancy. Those are 3 best practices that guide increase in rent. Like I said, the law did not especially say what should occur. It only says there should be no arbitrary increase in rent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That means does that mean the tenant has the right to go to court if he feels that the rent increase is arbitrary?
Yes, the tenant has a right to go to court if his rent is arbitrary, but I often say I'm more of an arbitrator and a mediator than going to court. I often believe that one is even your landlord. I wonder if you are taking your landlord to court and not stay in the house, there could be more tension in that house if you're going to court over that. So I always advise negotiations and discussions as opposed to going to court. But yes, you have a right to go to court if your landlord increases arbitrarily. We can always discuss and make them understand that, yes, I understand I have a right to increase rent, but this rent is arbitrary. I can pay this amount. And so let both parties negotiate and come to an agreement as to what the rent should be, as opposed to going to court in that regard.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with you when it comes to alternative dispute resolution. It just saves a lot of time, money, stress, and and even the relationship. At the end
Exactly.
of the day, you go to court, you and your landlord, or either way, your hearts loggerheads. So thank God for Lagos State that have mediation centers all around
Yeah.
where you could just
Yeah.
settle the matters. I've seen it work a lot for me. Just take the
Yes,
landlord
it
and
does.
tenant there, we discuss, we agree to certain terms they sign, and the tenant leave, or do what he's expected to do. At the end of the day,
Exactly.
you save your money. At least it
Exactly.
won't be as much as what you pay going to court to the lawyer. So I will always advise that the first let the first thing that comes to our mind be settling the matter amicably, not just going to court. You know,
Yes.
I mean, I mean, they're not going to court. So that takes me to provision in the tenancy agreement. Um, that's the issue of putting in alternative resolution into the tenancy agreement. Now, so what do you advise? Do you advise people do mediation or arbitration?
Yeah. So, and for me, before I advise all the levels of discussion when it comes to landlord and tenant issues, because more often than not, a large part of those issues are caused by money. And so, if you are spending money to resolve an issue caused by money, then I would not advise you to go that route. So, I always first will start let people negotiate. You are a landlord, he is your tenant. You are the tenant, he is your landlord, or she is your landlord or landlady. You should look for a way to discuss on issues when they arise, even before either approaching the mediation center or going to arbitration. First, discuss and negotiate. You can always come to terms as, oh, I can ship this much, you can ship this much. And so I often prefer having that relationship maintained and for both parties to negotiate as much as possible. So that's my starting point for any issue between landlord and tenant. Let both of them who are both in the house negotiate and discuss. If that does not work, then I advocate mediation. The CMC is always open. It's free for both parties in Lagos. You can approach the Citizens Mediation Center, that's the CMC, to negotiate between the landlord. They will assist you as a neutral third party to also tell either party what the position of the law is regarding that issue. There are times when a landlord will be having a position that is wrong in the eye of the law, but it feels because he has been doing it for so many years, he is right. The tenant too might have a position that is also wrong, but because many landlords have been doing it for him that we might think is right. So there are times when both parties can go to mediation center where they will tell you a neutral third party who is not a landlord or a co-tenant can tell both parties what the law is regarding the issue brought before them. Then you can both be able to agree on that issue. So I advise mediation. But if both parties cannot resolve it by mediation, then depending also on the amount involved, then I can say you can go to arbitration first before then going to court. But if it is for murder matter, I'll say from mediation, you can just go to magistrate court and have a judge or have a magistrate pronounce what each party's right is, and then you can resolve the matter as easy as possible. But my advice always start with mediation, mediate as much as possible. If it's a co-tenant or a co-landlord, other landlords in the area, you can inform them. Please help me discuss with my landlord on this issue. Look for a way to resolve it before, because that saves you a lot of money, time, and stress. Because once you even go to the CMC, it's free, but you have to transport yourself from your house to the CMC. You have to miss work office to attend the CMC mediation date. Those are things that are advisable to avoid as much as possible. Mediate and negotiate as best as you can. If it fails, then you can do the CMC. If that fails, if the amount is quite substantial, you can do arbitration then before going to the court. But if it's something also, you can go to the magistrate court, resolve it, and both parties can move on with their lives.
All right, thank you. Another question is, does the landlord have to have a particular reason for giving a tenant notice to quit? Can a landlord decide to evict a tenant immediately his rent expires without any reason?
Okay,
Or
so
does it have to be a reason?
yeah, so that is very debatable, but for the interest of peace, the law a less or a very simple way to put it is that the law would not force a willing tenant on an unwilling landlord. So if the landlord has as flimsy a reason as possible to eject the tenant, the law cannot force that landlord to continue to house or accommodate that tenant if he says, I don't want this tenant in my house anymore. So it's always there has to be a reason, but the reason need not, so for example, the tenant cannot say, oh, this reason doesn't make sense to me, therefore I'm not leaving. You get, so irrespective of the reason the landlord asks for giving you a notice to quit, you cannot go to court to say the landlord must make sure I stay in this house. despite the reason he has given me, I don't feel it's substantial enough. No, the tenant cannot, because the law cannot force a willing tenant on a willing landlord, so that the landlord, if an issue occurs and there's breakdown of peace, and it will be like the court forces tenant to stay in my house, I didn't want him in this house, and the court forcing me to have him there. So for that interest of peace, if the landlord says, I don't want this tenant in this house anymore, the law often says notice to quit should be accepted. So even if there's no reason at all, the landlord can issue notice to quit, and the tenant cannot say, I don't accept that reason. So that's what I'm trying to say. Even though you have to have a reason, but reason doesn't need to make sense to the tenant. If whatever the reason is, and the landlord gives a notice to quit, the court most times would uphold that notice to quit. I've not heard or seen a situation whereby the court says the notice to quit is not reasonable. As long as the notice is there, the length of time is there, you have enough time to leave, then you can. However, I've seen some landlords abuse that opportunity, where, for example, a tenant comes to the house, renovates the house, makes it very beautiful, and then after 1 year, landlord says, oh, my son is coming back from America, and I want to stay in that house, therefore leave. Even though the tenant can be infuriated, can be angry and all, it cannot force, the court cannot force the landlord to retain that tenant in that apartment. So it's just a matter of balance between both parties. But one way the tenant can do this, that make us go to another discussion of improvements and what the law says about that, is that what the tenant can do is, when you want to make such improvements, you can have the landlord consent and agree for you to either net off some of those improvements from your rent, and such that if he wants to eject you before you're able to enjoy the improvement, you can request for those funds back from the landlord, because they allow you to enjoy that improvement after accepting to net it off future rent. So that's one way a tenant willing to make improvements can ensure that it's able to make some of those funds back. But aside from that, if there's no agreement of such, and you come into the house as a tenant, you sign for 1 year fixed term, and then you spend so much to renovate it, and then after 6 months, the landlord says, I don't want you, and gives a notice to quit, you cannot take the landlord to court to say, I don't want to leave because I've made improvements. So those are things that both parties need to understand regarding tenancy. Yes, the landlord has to give you a reason, but that reason doesn't need to make sense to you as a tenant for it to be valid. As long as it says, oh, I want to use it for personal use, or I want to do something in the house, it can validly give the notice to quit, and it's going to be binding on both of you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you mentioned the next thing that trying to ask about improvement. So have fixed tiles, they've made the consent, but so, and they go ahead to request from the landlord reimbursement, and the landlord said, I did not send you to do it. But even there are situations wherein that the landlord is saying that after the improvement, the landlord is considering giving them notice to quit. And they're like, I've spent a whole lot of money fixing this, and you're giving me quick notice. So what do you have to say about, no, I know you've mentioned a bit of it, but if you can go deep into it when it comes to compensation for fixing things in the house, consent or no consent, you could treat both sides.
Yeah. So I like you noted earlier, I touched it a bit, and then I'll just give a bit deeper. So if you want to, so one thing there is that a lot of people need to understand that Nigerian law regarding tenancies differs from other places, and so we have to go back, just gradually improving our tenancy laws to accommodate for those things. However, we're also seeing abuse of the law from both sides, and so that's why legislators are always careful as to tilting to one side or the other. Because, for example, before there used to be really landlords could eject tenants anyhow. Like you will see, so you go to work and you come back and your laws are outside your house. Now the laws have protected tenants such that you need to give notice to quit and all before you're ejected. We have seen abuse on part of tenants, where tenants, for example, would not pay rent and say, go to court, I'm not leaving your house. And then so the law tries to balance both in Nigeria because of the peculiarity of the people in Nigeria. So one of those issues we have also with what is a tenantable apartment. So because, for example, in other countries, for example, an apartment without electricity is not tenantable. For example, if you're in cold regions like in the Europe, without electricity and a heater, that house is not tenantable. But in Nigeria, even if there is no water and there is no light in that house, as long as there is door, there is window, and all that, in Nigerian law, that property apartment is tenantable. And so sometimes what you call as tenantable, there are times when I'll be invited into discussions where I'm like, oh, in Nigerian law, this apartment is tenantable, even though it doesn't have the best of the best. As long as it's a place where people can live, it is a tenantable, habitable apartment in Nigeria. So light or water, though they are essential under Nigerian law, they are not preconditions for an apartment to be called tenantable or not. Because there are people who you can have your solar, you can have other means of electricity without connecting to national grid. You can also have other means of water. You can have a well, you can have other means of water without connecting to water corporation. So even though those are essentials, they are not they are not things that are seen under Nigerian law as what you need to have to make a house tenantable. So if you come into an apartment that has all those basic things and then you now want to improve it to your own standard, it is on you as a tenant. So the best you can do to protect yourself is to discuss first with the property owner and say, I want to make this and this improvement. However, I will be glad if I can enjoy this improvement for a number of time. And so you can either go into some agreement with the landlord, say, okay, I want to stay here for 5 years so that I can enjoy the improvement I'm doing on this house. And so there's just a form of agreement between you and the landlord such that within that 5-year period, it cannot eject you. If it does, then you can claim damages from him. And it doesn't have something because a simple email conversation between two of you that, oh, I came into the apartment, I noticed this, I want to do this much. Do I have the permission to go it? On the understanding do I have the permission to go on the understanding that I will be in this apartment for the next 5 years and I'll be paying my rent appropriately. So you can have that email correspondence or even a WhatsApp message correspondence. So those correspondences between the two of you, you can have it and keep it as your evidence, because under our law, Supreme Court has said that even WhatsApp messages can be enough documentary evidence in court. So you can just really do it on WhatsApp or email, or wait to just have it written. Because if it's just verbal, a landlord can call tomorrow and say, no, I didn't say it, and just be your word against his. But if there's a communication correspondence between the two of you that you have said somewhere, that would go a long way. So have that discussion with him that I want to make this improvement in the understanding that I will have done extensive improvement, there is no legal basis for you to eject, for you to refuse that kind of notice to quit. It can, I don't know, has a valid reason, it has a reason, no matter how stupid it is in court, for him to eject you, the court would honor that notice to quit, and you'd have to leave with all the improvements you have done. And interestingly, some tenants, out of anger, will say, okay, I will destroy all what I have done. Even if you are the one improving the house, the law in the land in Nigeria is that he that owns the land owns everything upon it. So even if you are a tenant there and you have improved it, that improvement you have done belongs to the landlord, because he's one that owns the land and owns everything on it. So if you destroy apartment when you are living, the landlord can even sue you for arson. It is a criminal offense, even though you are the one that improved it. So you have to understand how the law plays. So you are a tenant in the house. Whatever improvements you do belongs to the landlord, because he owns the land in which you are improving upon. And so if you are living and you're angry and you destroy, you can be legally sued for arson, that is willful destruction of property. If you leave, if I say, I put this thing, I want to move it, I want to destroy it myself, you don't have a right to willfully destroy property. So just to understand that dynamics between landlord and tenant regarding improvement. I hope I've been able to touch as many sides as I should in this discussion.
Yes, I want to add an additional question. So what
I'm all
happens if
yes.
even after they have agreed that the tenant can go ahead to make the improvement, and the landlord and their evidences, and the landlord still go back on his word? What is the play? What should the tenant do?
Yeah, so this resolution mechanism you said earlier, they can all come into play. First is to negotiate and say, you have this document, we have this information, this is my evidence, we both discuss, you said I can. If it says no, then you can take it to the CMC. Once it gives you a notice to quit, you can write to the CMC for them to intervene and let the landlord understand the implications of what is about to do. That even though you own the land, you add a mutual agreement with this tenant based on this correspondences between the two of you that he will use it for 5 years, and you agree that he should go ahead with improvement. He has done it. You cannot now eject him after 1 year. If the landlord provides remediation, if he still fails, then the tenant has a legal basis to go to court on those bases. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to ask the final question from my own hand before we treat the question on the meeting chat.
Yeah.
So if there's a landlord or a landlady that's about to have tenants in his house, how does he or she screen tenant, or what should the person do as a new landlord or a new tenant, or a new landlord or a new landlady? What should the person do?
Interestingly, my first response is number one is to pray. That's the first thing I advise anybody to do, because even with the best of screenings and intentions, only God knows what will happen tomorrow. We manage many parties, and there are some clients who have been, we had one who the client has been, the tenant was paying very well, but sadly he lost his job, and sadly from there went into depression, and he hasn't been able to get over. So he's been owing rent now for 2 years, but prior to that time, for the last 8 years, he's been paying on time, even paying in advance. He's been improving the house, and for the past 2 years, he hasn't been able to pay. So even though you can't say he's a bad tenant, but it's circumstances of life that happened to him. So sadly, some can enter into your house to say the person is a good tenant, but issues of life can happen to somebody, making one not able to pay. So the best is to pray. That's the starting point. But what you can do on your own is to first, before getting internet, is to get what we call. So we have a form where we give tenants to fill with some basic details regarding who he is, his background, and all that. And then he would have 2 guarantors who attest his behavior. And we also have the phone number, or also link up with his current or previous landlord or whoever he has stayed with, to know how the person is, because there are about 5 things we look out for a tenant. One is the person's ability to pay. So that by that you look at where you work in a reputable place, or does he have enough means to sustain him. Second is to look at the use of the house. So for example, if the person is a family of 5 or 4 and they're coming to a 1-bedroom apartment, a family of 7 or 8 and not just a 1-bedroom, like they will overstress the facility, and so you may decide against that that will be an overcrowding of the facility. You also have to look at how does this person use previous apartment. Though he can pay on time, but it's just now you can say yes, he pays on time, but this person doesn't use apartment very well. It destroys things and leaves property worse off than it came in. So, or the person may not be paying on time, but uses your property well. So you have to balance those things. That's the third one. The fourth one is how is his behavior in the neighborhood. It can be paying on time, paying the property well, but it causes trouble. Like from the street to the house, everybody knows it. So you have to look at that behavioral aspect too, that how does this person behave in the neighborhood? How does he behave around? Is this person good? And the fifth one is is he someone that takes care of the property like his own? Does he repair it? Or once the tap in his toilet is faulty, landlord come and fix my tap. Or tomorrow he's saying, oh, and the pipe has busted somewhere. And then so you have to just look at those 5 things that we look out for in a tenant, to say, based on these 5 criteria, we can say, okay, yeah, this person will be a good tenant or not. But like I said, despite all these criteria, nobody knows tomorrow. Life can happen to anyone. As somebody who must have passed on all the 5 can have a life incident that may not make him a good tenant anymore. Somebody may have been having issues in the past, making it not good, and they might come into an apartment and then begin to flourish and be a good person, be a good tenant and all. So I've seen both happen to people, where somebody who they have said is a bad person, and we even told the landlord, don't take this tenant based on what we have. Is and person like my spirit feels like accepting this tenant. I accepted the tenant, and tenant moved to the house, and his business was flourishing. He was paying rent on time. It was a very, very good tenant in that apartment. So I've seen both occur, and so that's why I say the first is to pray. But those 5 parameters, things you can use to determine how the person has been, or what his track record as a tenant has been, before deciding whether or not to accept that person into the apartment.
Yeah, thank you. And I must
You're
add
welcome.
to it that your relationship as a tenant with your landlord will come in play when a situation happens when you have some delay in paying rent. You know, the kind of relationship you already had, if you probably the kind of person that you always have, fighting with your tenant and your landlord. By the time there's an issue that comes my rent, he won't understand. But if he has seen you as someone that has always been a good tenant, and certain things happen that maybe from a few months you're unable to pay, even some landlord can be so nice that even if for almost a year it's not paid, but because of your past relationship. And so we always emphasize for tenants, have good relationship with your landlord. It will always come in handy for you in the future, just in case, you never know, as you said, nobody knows tomorrow.
Yeah, and just to
Nobody
add to it, and that's very good. Like he's been there for about 10 years now. So for the past 8 years, he's been paying on time. He and the landlord are very good. So even he has been for 2 years, but landlord is like, we should write off the last 2 years rent, that until he's able to pay, we shouldn't disturb him about his rent. That he's a good person. He knows that if he has the money, he will pay. That is just life that happened to him. He lost his job, and so the landlord has been extremely. And you also see the effort he has made. Or he tried doing Uber for a while. He has been trying to. So the landlord has been very understanding that he knows his plight, and she's like, let's write off the rent for that apartment. So like I said, I've seen both sides. So like you said, relationship is very key. Always have the relationship between you and your landlord, so that when issues occur, the landlord will be understanding. Unlike, I'm also seeing issues where some tenants can be very interesting, where a tenant can, as you're owing rent and then you're buying a brand new car, or you're owing rent and you're traveling abroad, or you're always posting nice things on the gram and you are still owing your rent. So there are interesting things that do occur on both sides, but just to be able to have that on the relationship with your landlord to explain things, and then be a good tenant in general. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Babade, for
You're
all
welcome.
this. So, to answer the questions on the chat, and my colleague Messi Nicholas is going to take it from here to take up the questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Bayo. Please, the questions we have here. The first question says, good evening, and thanks for this informative webinar. Please, I would like these questions to be answered according to what Lagos State law says. If my rent expires by March 31st, 2023, and upon payment, my landlord saved me a quit notice, does it mean I have to stay for another 1 year if I am a fixed-term payer? That's the first question. And can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. I can hear you
Good.
clearly. I'll just take both questions, or
Okay.
you want me to answer them one after the other?
Okay. All right. So please, can you help us?
Okay.
Yes, that's the first question. And the second one, the same person.
Yes.
The first question, did you get it?
Yes, I did.
Network is bad.
Yeah, I did get your first question. I got your first question.
We can hear you.
Please, can you
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, please, can you address the first question?
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Okay,
if you're a tenant for a fixed term or a fixed term tenant, and your rent expires on March 31st, 2023, and you have paid for 1 year, that is, you have paid from March 31st, 2023 to March 31st, from April 1, 2023 to March 31st, 2024, if you have paid for that 1 year period, and given notice to quit on March 31st, you are to stay till the end of your 1 year that you have paid for, and then you have to leave afterwards. So even if you give a notice to quit on that March after you have paid for the next 1 year, and you're a tenant for a fixed term, you have to use your tenancy period that you have used up, except if the landlord wants you to leave or leave earlier than the end of your tenancy, then the landlord should be ready to refund you for the period of time he wants you to leave. So, practical example, you paid for 1 year from March from April 1, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. Paid for that 1 year period, and you paid 120,000 naira as your rent, and he wants you to leave by in 6 months' time. So if he's ready to refund you the remaining 6 months of 60,000 to you, and wants to leave at the end of 6 months, he can also do that if both parties agree. However, if you do not agree, then you can use the end of that your period and then leave afterwards. So what the law says is it should give you notice to quit for 6 months. If it gives you 6 months, it can give more than 6 months notice. But once it gives you a minimum of 6 months, it is valid. Then you can choose to leave at the end of that 6 months if he's ready to refund you the remainder. But if he's not ready to refund, then you can stay to the end of the period and then leave afterwards. I hope you got David Fashade got the appropriate response to his question.
Okay, he's saying that that's not the question.
Okay, yeah, I saw the follow-up question with that. When he was trying to renew the landlord inside the equipment, then you have to leave after 6 months that notice is given. So that means if you give you on April 1st, so that's April, May, June, July, August, then by the end of August, then you have to leave at the end of the 6 months to quit he has given you, since you are a tenant for a fixed term. But what he's just giving you 6 months notice. And after the 6 months expires, then you are to leave. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please, Mr. David, I hope you're okay. You understand the point, the explanation. Please, let's move to the next question. Okay. I think he sent 2 questions. Okay. Please, okay. Sorry, that wasn't a question.
No, so the next one by David was talking about when can a landlord increase rental fee and what percentage. And I think we already touched that earlier.
Address that, yes.
Yes,
just recap that there are 3 rules or 3 best practices. One is the amount. It should be no more than 50% of the current rent. So if your rent, for example, is 120,000 per annum, the highest they can increase up to is 180,000 for the following year. It can increase from 120 to 200, can be seen as arbitrary increase. Okay. Second is the frequency of increase. Is advised 2 to 3 years gap from one increase to the other. Moving from every year will be seen as too often, and once in 5 years or once in 10 years will be seen as too late. And once you want to increase to match the current rent in the area, it can be seen as an arbitrary increase. And the third is the notice of the increase should be a minimum of 6 months from to the end of your current rent for them to give you an increase of notice in rent. So there are just 3 best rules regarding increase in rent.
Yeah, so the increase has to be reasonable. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you. The next question is: good evening, the landlord in the house. Please let me know if the landlord has a say on the number of occupants in the rented facility. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's from Dr. Olakunle. Yeah, so yes, so the landlord, like one of the things I noticed regarding the requirements that a tenant, a landlord should watch out for in a tenant is, one is the number of people that want to stay in that apartment. Like, for example, if it's a 1-bedroom apartment and then you want to have 8-9 people in that apartment, you will stress the facility of the landlord and can lead to and can affect the property. So we often advise against that. So even though the landlord, for example, cannot decide as to number of as to how often the family should have children and all those factors. But it can decide as to the number. So, for example, the things can one is that tenancy agreement. It can say tenancy agreement that is agreement minimum of 3 adults or minimum of 2 adults in this apartment. It can put down the tenancy agreement as one of the conditions. So if it notices that there are more than 2 adults staying there, is a valid reason for notice to quit. So you can quit them on that basis. For example, if you did, even if you didn't put that in the tenancy agreement, and then it sees that there are about 7 or 8 people in the apartment, it can validly give notice to quit for the reason that the property is being overstressed, overcrowded. That can be a valid reason for notice to quit. So there are things that landlords can do based on the number of occupants in their facility to limit an excessive use or overcrowding of facility. The landlord has rights to restrict it. For example, it gives a residential apartment and then notices that every day people are bringing in clothes and they are washing clothes throughout every day. The lines are being filled with clothes. It can restrict and say that it can be valid for notice to quit to say, oh, this party is being overused. And I did not envisage this volume of clothes being washed by somebody in per day or per week in this house. That can be a valid reason for notice to quit, and it can quit that tenant on that reason. So even though you cannot say do this or don't do this expressly, you can put in tenant agreement that this is what I want. And then if a tenant goes against what you want, you can validly quit that tenant. Or even if you don't put it there, you can equally use that as a basis to quit that tenant. I see a thumbs up from Dr. Olakule, meaning that that has been sufficiently answered.
I think he's satisfied. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Please, the next question is who
No, there's
has
a
the
question
duty
from
of
Adetutu Ogunsonwo that we missed. Which was before
that's not really a question. I think it's a
okay.
request. Yeah,
No, it's been treated as well. Minimum
Okay,
year
no
of
problem.
regeneration.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's we are
That's
moving to
been
the
treated. Yeah, I just read it carefully. It has been treated. Yeah, thank you.
all right. Okay. Who has the duty of repairing damaged things in the house? Damaged things like, making repairs. Is it the landlord or the tenants? Whose duty is it to do that? I think you mentioned that, but
Yeah, so
okay.
it depends on. Okay, thank you very much. It depends on what was damaged. Yeah, so the general rule is anything inside the apartment that gets damaged during the period of tenancy should be repaired by the tenant. So, for example, the tap in the kitchen or the handle of the water closet, those things that get damaged within the apartment during the tenancy period should be fixed by the tenant. But things outside it, for example, the roof is leaking, the landlord is to fix that. The fence got broken, landlord is to fix that. So, but there are some places that can be touchy. For example, the bowl or the water or the pumping machine, who is to fix that? And so that's why there are sometimes that generally it's the landlord responsibility to fix the water pumping machine. However, I've seen cases where it's been damaged severally within a period of time. That so within 1 year, for example, the tenant landlord has to replace it like twice. So landlord can then transfer that to the tenants that if you misuse the pumping machine and it gets damaged within a period of time, the tenant has to fix it. So we've seen circumstances where instances has made such rules to be either reversed or changed based on circumstances of a particular apartment. But generally, anything outside the house, like pumping machine, is the landlord's responsibility. The gate is the landlord's responsibility. The gate gets damaged or something happens to the gate, landlord's responsibility. A part of the foundation has a crack, is the landlord to fix that. A pillar in the house has an issue. Anything structural, is also the landlord's role. But if it's something within the house, like the handle of one of the rooms, the doors of one of the rooms, the tenant is to fix that. Or the bulb goes out, the tenant is to fix that. So those are just some things. If it's something that happens within the house, the tenant is to fix it. If something that happens outside the house, something that is structural, then the landlord is to fix it.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You explained that clearly. So let's move to the next question. Is the landlord permitted to personally evict a tenant? Does he have that right to evict a tenant on his own?
Okay, so by personally evict, if it's to issue notice to quit, yes, he can. But to go into the house to carry the landlord's, the tenant's load and take it
Okay,
out
let's
of the
say
house, no, he
self-help.
cannot.
Okay.
Yeah, self-help, no, he cannot.
Self-help.
He cannot.
Okay.
No, he cannot. But if it's to issue a notice to quit, the landlord can issue a notice to quit as a landlord. He doesn't need to get a lawyer to issue a notice to quit. Landlord himself can put a tenant in an apartment. He can validly do that. As long as you base your rules of notice and order, he can validly quit the tenant by issuing a notice to quit. But he can't go to the tenant's house to take the loan and go out. If he does that, that is against the law. The tenant can sue the landlord for damages to anything that happened to the goods and for also general damages in total. So that's against the law. He cannot use self-help or call out or area boys to, he cannot do that. He should go through the process of the court to eject the tenant legally and lawfully.
Yeah, so please, self-help is not allowed. It's not allowed, as in the law
Yeah,
frowns
because
at it.
because at the end of the day, even you as a landlord can lose your house.
Exactly.
There are things that could happen.
Not allowed. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So please, there's a new, I think the question just dropped. Like, can a landlord increase rent when there is no rent increase? When there is no rent increase clause in the tenancy agreement?
Yes, like we said, it can increase their general rules regarding increase of rent, which I've said earlier. So even there's no rent increase clause, the landlord can still increase rent, even without a rent increase clause. Yeah.
Okay, if a landlord created a lease agreement with a tenant more than 5 years, first rent for the first 3 years was stipulated. A rent increase clause was erroneously missing in the agreement. If the landlord intends to increase rent for the remainder of the term, how does he go about it? If he intends to evict the tenant, what notice would be given? When would the term elapse?
Okay, yes. So
three different questions.
so for those who don't understand those terms, a tenancy differs a bit from a lease. So tenancy is for a period of time for less than 2 years. A lease is from 2 years and above. And so both of them differ. So a tenancy, for example, can be what the landlord and tenant signs is called a tenancy agreement. For a lease, that's by a deed of lease. And so some rules differ from a tenancy and a lease. And so one of the things in that a lease agreement should have is either a rent graduated or rent increase clause. Say, okay, for the first 2 years is this amount, after which you would increase this amount. But in the instant case, that increase was not stated there. And so there is always bound to be conflict as to what that amount should be. But the best situation is just to go back to dispute resolution things to go. In that case, a dispute as to what the increase should be or whether it should be an increase. The first is for both parties to discuss. Yes, I've been here for 2 years, and the tenancy states what the 2 or what the 3 years should be. The last 2 years don't state, so let both of us now agree as to what should happen to that. If they're not able to agree, they can approach the CMC for both of them to mutually have a third party to look at and see what can be a mutually agreeable rents. If they are not able to agree, then they may need to proceed to the court to determine that. But like I said, it's just for them to agree as to what that should be and between the two of them. But if he wants to evict that tenant, first of all, it's whether or not a landlord in that instance can evict a tenant. For the rules for a lease differs from a tenancy. So for a lease, there has to be a termination clause in the lease agreement that states what should occur to terminate it. And so if that termination clause, for example, is even excluded, then what happens most times is to look at if the tenant or the lessor or the lessee, has breached any term of the agreement. If he has not breached any other term and there's no termination clause, the landlord sadly cannot evict that lessee, because he has to have a legal basis to evict. So like I said, there are differences between a tenancy and a lease. A lease brings in some twist. So you can't just evict a lessee anyhow. There has to be a legal basis for you to want to evict that lessee. So those rules would have to be part. So they have to look at the general wording of that lease to see if there can be a loophole or something that the landlord can hinge upon to eject the lessor, to eject the lessee. If there is nothing, then he has to just look for how to mediate or resolve that dispute on what the rent for the last 2 years is. It's a bit of a tricky situation, but those are just some general advice based on what is given. Once one reads the lease agreement, deed of lease in totality, one can know how to advise either party to that particular transaction.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
The next question, after how many months default can a landlord issue a quit notice? After how many months default can a landlord issue a quit notice?
Yeah, so depending, once rents are to be paid in advance. So once a tenant is defaulting in rent, then the landlord can issue a quit notice to that tenant for failure to pay rent. And so there are a number of rules regarding quit notice and things of that nature. So the tenant can, for failure to pay rent, even from the day after, you can. But what, like I said, is a bigger part of those issues are relationship between both parties and how it's done. So, for example, parties that we try to give enough notice that, okay, 6 months your tenancy ending, like reminder, the tenancy it will end in the next 6 months. Do you intend to renew? If you want to renew, pay prior to your tenancy ending. 3 months to the end again, we send another reminder, your tenancy ends in 3 months. If you want to renew before your tenancy ends. And then a week before, if you haven't paid, we give a reminder again. So that from a day after, and he has not paid, you legally have a right to eject that tenant. Because I given sufficient notice for him to indicate he intends to renew. Because normally before your tenancy expires, you should pay your rent in advance. And if for any reason you're not able to pay, you should inform your landlord that your rent might be a month or 2 months late for one reason or the other, and make do of that. So the day after your rent has expired and you do not pay your rent, your landlord has a legal right to eject you from that property. So it doesn't need to be able to a month. A day after your rent has expired, your landlord legally has a right to eject you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you once
You're
again.
welcome.
Okay, Mr. David Fashande, he has one last question, and it's if the tenancy agreement says the rent is to be paid in full on or before the due date. If I don't have the means to pay as stated, maybe I was unable to pay 9 months advance, can I be taken to court or be ejected?
It's similar to what I just stated earlier. What you can do, like one of the things that Adeola said is relationship matters a lot in tenancy agreement.
Exactly.
You and your landlord, you have to, a landlord will not take a move to eject you if your general conduct has been quite peaceful and good. Except, of course, you have to also understand that this is also a two-way approach. There's some landlords who, for example, their means of sustenance is the rent on their property. And so you're not paying rent means they will not have food. And so there are people who, for example, their pension or gratuity, they used to build houses around Lagos or around wherever, and it's the rent that they live on. So you're not paying rent means they would not have food to eat. So you need to understand how, so that's why some landlords can be a bit particular about their rent, and from the day after you default, they can take moves to eject you because that is their own means of sustenance and you're depriving them of sustaining themselves. So it's also to understand that as a tenant, yes, you have rights and other, but you should understand that your rights also infringe on somebody else's right to meaningful living. If, for example, the house is his means of sustenance and it puts it, so we try to, in such instances, for example, we always try to make the tenant understand. That's why we give them enough notice that if you would not renew, please inform us so that the landlord can begin to take moves to get another tenant. If you are renewing, even if it will be late, inform us so that the landlord can make arrangements for the money coming from elsewhere. So that if he probably has banked on your rent as his means of sustenance for the next few months, And then when you're a day after, you're not going to say that, sorry, I cannot pay you the rent. You have also disrupted somebody's livelihood and his means of eating and his own life. So you have to have that balance when either the tenant or the landlord to understand that, yes, if you cannot pay, inform ahead so that the landlord can make alternative arrangements for a means of income, so that he's not banking on your money to come and then on the day you're meant to pay, you're coming up with, I'm sorry, I cannot pay. That itself can be upsetting a loan. So we understand what some landlords face too, and also what some tenants face. We're able to be that middle gap to make the tenant understand that if you will not pay, inform us so we can tell your landlord that, sorry, based on what's happening to you either at your workplace or based on what's happening in your internal issues. For example, it can be an illness and then you have to go on operation, spend all the money on the operation, you can't add the means to pay. Inform your landlord on time so that he understands that and then is able to make arrangement. But if you cannot pay and you don't inform him beforehand, he has the right to take you to court to eject you. Yeah.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. David, I hope you are fine. Okay, please, I have one more question from my DM. My DM. Okay, the question is, what happens when there are structural defects, like leaking roof and swollen floor in a residence? There has been complaints over the months for about 6 months now. Yet no response from the landlord to actively fix it. The yearly lease is close to expiration. Can the tenant delay renewal? What measures can be taken to ensure that the damage is fixed, as the tenant only enjoyed about 4 months of living in the property on the current lease? Please, what's your advice?
For that, if it's a structural defect, then it is a responsibility of the landlord to fix a structural defect. Once a structural defect occurs, the landlord is to fix that. So like leaking roof, swollen floor is solely the landlord's issue. But like we said, relationship is very key in this instance. One way is to, for example, the landlord may not even have the funds to fix it. The tenant can say, okay, landlord, I will fix the roof and the floor. I will give you the bill and I can net it off my next rent. So as opposed to me paying, I know it's your duty, because the landlord can be like, yes, it's my duty, but I don't have the money to fix it. I know it's your duty, but I'll fix it. We can both negotiate with the workers that will come and they will fix it, but I will net off the cost from my subsequent rent. And then you can have that arrangement with the landlord, as to more really correspondence with it, and then you can say that so the tenant can fix both and then enjoy the tenancy and net it off his current rent, rent. But if the landlord, for example, is saying, I don't have the money, you can fix it, but I'm going to get my rent in full and it's not being cooperative, then the tenant has a right to take that landlord to court, because that is not a tenantable place. If your roof is leaking and then your properties can be destroyed, that house is not tenantable. So then it's a basis for the tenant to sue that landlord for that. But like I said, before you go to the route of going to court or suing, try and explore all that means. And one that's often working sometimes to say, okay, I will make those payments or I'll make those repairs, but I'll net it off my future rent in that apartment. So that can be for you to enjoy your current tenancy and then also also net off your future rent while still living in a property that is good to be for you to be able to stay in. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much, Vice Mercy, and thank you to Babade for the time and for all the participants as well. We appreciate you for your time. I noticed that on a Bright made inquiries about mortgage, so you can contact our guest speaker. He's a real estate lawyer, so and his contact has been shared on the meeting chat room. You can contact him. Because I have one final question.
Feel free.
So is there a law or are there laws that that guides the quality of houses being built? We see the square meter of some houses are so Like, see the sitting room and the room and the kitchen. Even the kitchen is like passage. So are there laws that guide the quality of houses that are coming, that are being built by the agent or estate agent or developers or landlords?
Yeah. So legally, yes, there are rules. Normally, before you build any apartments in any state or even Lagos, you need to obtain a building permit. A building permit will tell you, you take a structural drawing, though, you see what you have to build there, and then you have to get it approved before you start building. Even if you have to do a renovation to renovate some part, you have to take the drawing of that renovation, take it to the building, take it there for them to approve it before you do any renovation. So legally, that is what is meant to occur. And so, however, like a lot of things happen with contrary to what the law says, people having 3-bedroom flats attached to a wall or and then attached to the fence of the house, and they just do different things in different ways without getting necessary permit and approvals. And because of this, also a lot of pressure on housing. You see a lot of tenants managing or just saying, let me have somewhere to sleep, and they just get those apartments in church stage. Like you see some kitchens. In fact, there was one I saw one time where I think you have to pass through the toilet to get to the kitchen. And then it was very interesting. And there are people who just that was the house I saw after searching for house, and then the houses I was seeing I couldn't afford. That's when I could afford, and I saw, and then just pay and live in such conditions. So there are different types of housing that people are just forced to live in because they don't have a means to stay in other better apartments, or that's what they could find, or they was the pressure to live where they have to move somewhere, and then they have to just accept whatever they see. So normally they're going to get approval from the town planning authorities before you build any property. And so what are the things you can do? So there are inspectors you can call, but the challenge is always there is that who would report. If a tenant, for example, reports his landlord for doing a structure like that, the tenant himself will be without a house. And so those are things that comes into play in reality, where normally that kind of thing, I'm going to report to the LASBICA, that's Lagos State Building Control Agency. If you see that kind of structure, that will report to them, and then they will come and see it. If it doesn't meet with Lagos standard, they can demolish such. You see that there's been some news circulating now where Lagos wants to demolish about 349 buildings that are currently dilapidated. So it's LASBICA that does that, so they will demolish such structures. But even tenants has to be concerned that if I report to LASBICA after I move in, I'll be without a house myself. So the tendency to report is often very low for tenants to report. So you should just move on and get an apartment as opposed to doing that. Like we know there's a 22 million housing deficit in Nigeria, so people need houses every day. If you build, no matter the amount of houses you want to build, if it's affordable, people would fully subscribe the house before you finish completing it. The many apartments that as is being built is being taken. There's a lot of pressure on especially 1 and 2 bedrooms. There's a lot of pressure, young school leavers, bachelors, newly married people looking for houses to stay, and so they take it out very quickly. So it is a lot of pressure. Like so once you have even if it's a one room where the kitchen, toilet, bathroom are all in one corner, and then the room is, people would move into it within weeks after you, even before you finish building it, people are already fully subscribing.
Paying for it.
Are paying for it and moving into it. So there's a lot of pressure on housing. So that's why people just subscribe to those kind of structures. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll ask you 2 questions on one. So what do you foresee as the solution in the future? And what are the final words for tenants and landlord in the meeting?
Okay, so foreseeable future, normally a large number of things are meant to be done by government, but I'm one of those who I'm saying I do not always like to say government should, because I'm like, since before I was born, any solution people prescribe, I always saying the government should do this, and nothing ever gets done. So I always try to see what are the opportunities in these problems and what can people do. And one simple way is, if there's any anybody with some funds that is not actively using, real estate is a way you can actively push in those funds into, and you would obviously get your refund. So you can build nice standard structures that you will get your returns. Once you go into the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom studio apartment, you can never have a void period. The period places that are void are if you are building either 3, 4, 5 bedroom or a duplex in areas that are saturated already, like Lekki, Ikoyi, VI. You will obviously have void occupancy rates that are very high. But if you are building your 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom or studio 1, 2 bed in places that are populated, it would obviously make good for. So build your standard property, build it there, you make your refund. You get your funds. Also, because of the pressure on apartment, the default rate is a bit lower. Knowing fully well that once you default, you'll be evicted, and even while your matter is in court, somebody is booking to move into the apartment. So those pressure equally helps check default rates in those places, and those are very, very, and those are opportunities for people to come into the sector and invest in heavily. So these opportunities there. If you have the funds, please invest in that sector. There's a housing deficit, especially for young school leavers, newly married couples. They need places to stay in. So studio apartment, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. Once you have the funds, build massive structures. You can build mini estates that will have several units of such, and you would obviously get your returns on those investments. So you can move that sector, build structures, build a standard house. So that's one possible future I see of people coming into and seeing opportunities in the existing problems and making the best out of it. So it's a win-win. As an entrepreneur, you make your investment, and those who need houses will have good houses for them to rent, and both parties are able to be better off for it. And a final word for landlords and tenants. As a landlord, or wherever you are, be a good person. If you're a landlord, be a good landlord. If you're a tenant, be a good tenant. Tenant today can be a landlord tomorrow, and even a landlord somewhere can be a tenant somewhere else. So you also just be a good person. Whoever if you're a landlord or a tenant, be a good person and treat others as you want to be treated. So as a landlord, so more often than not, that's why just a bit of digression is that we also try to print the bigger picture of both the landlord and tenant, so that you should see other person's plight. I'll tell the tenant, for example, this landlord, your rent is means of livelihood. If you don't pay your rent, this landlord would not eat. And so your rent is important to you. Also for the tenant to tell the landlord, this person can be your child who is facing this predicament today. And his wife is sick, he has to go tomorrow, help somebody today so that somebody else can help your child tomorrow. So whatever you are, be a good person and do to others what wants to be done to you. And in the end, we would all have a very peaceful and loving country to live in. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I thank everyone for staying to this late, almost 9:30.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying up so late. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you, everyone.
we hope to have more of this as time goes on. And if you have any more questions after this webinar, you can always contact us on the numbers on the meeting chat room. Thank you so much. All right, good night.
All right, thank you,
Good night.
everyone. Good night.
Yeah.